It's 6:30 a.m. right now. I feel like death because I'm on an hour's sleep. Henry's singing in the shower, just got out, and we're heading up to Northern Mongolia to live with the Nomads. Hey, brother. This is starting an adventure, living with these people who live in some of the harshest living environment in the world. I'm so curious as to why we in the developed world live in such objectively hospitable, comfortable, and safe living environments, but still suffer so much. And you hear people in the West, in the developed world, complaining and genuinely suffering too from problems that are comparatively pretty tiny to what people dealt with throughout history, but also still today. And I'm curious as to why that is. And part of that curiosity is not just studying this question scientifically through academic research, but looking at it practically. What are people doing who cope well, who deal with difficulty? What are they doing differently that we can copy? And that's what this adventure will be about. I want to see how I react to these living conditions too. And we're going to do that just us bros, aren't we? Oh yeah! Oh yeah. The first thing we did once we landed in Ulaanbaatar was to meet the guys who were going to introduce us to the Nomads. And these guys drove us 13 hours north to get to this little village called Hutgal, which is south of Lake Kovsgol. When we arrived at Hutgal, it was still not where the Nomads lived, but it felt like another world. There's no one here in the winter. It's just empty. And there's a reason for that.
To Mongolia.
Dokdoi.
Dokdoi.
Just at the store. That's how you get the shopkeeper.
I'm gonna wake him up.
I'm waking up the shopkeeper. He's having a nap. The first thing we saw was this kid walking past with a limp, and he had just been walking for the past hour to gather water for his family because there's no running water there. And that's when we kind of realized, like, okay, we're getting remote now.
Yeah. Dokdoi.
Then we started living with the Nomads, and it felt like we were transported to another world again. Suddenly, we're ripping horse meat apart with our hands to eat dinner. We're drinking yak milk before bedtime. We're playing knuckle bones with real yak and sheep knuckle. And I'll show you where the Nomads live. So they're down there. It is so quiet. You can't hear anything except me yapping. That's Russia over there. This is the farm we're staying on with the Nomads. This is the gear. That's their house.
Senu.
That's hello in Mongolian. 10 people stayed in that one little house last night. 10 people you just sleep on the floor, and everyone keeps each other warm. People are waking up in the middle of the night to stoke the fire. And yeah, everyone's having a good old time.
It's the living, brother.
If you want water, you have to go to the nearest water hole, and you need to know where that is. If you don't have the local knowledge, you're just not going to drink unless you go all the way to the lake. But that can be hours and hours of walking and sometimes inaccessible. But still, it wasn't until we were fully immersed in their lifestyle that we realized that
their lives weren't just different on the superficial level in terms of what they were doing and where they lived, but they were different psychologically too. Me and Henry kept saying to each other, like, damn, these people are just surrounded by purpose. They always have an important job to do. Everything they're doing is necessary for their survival. And there's something beautiful about that. Even the things that they're doing in their off time, they're building social cohesion in a way that feels necessary in this environment.
We've just stopped off at the corner store to buy some vodka and sweets for the reindeer herders. That's how you pay them. You give them a little gift, vodka, and they like sweet things. So apparently that's the way. But yeah, you see just like reciprocal altruism everywhere because, I mean, obviously it's nice in a social network, but you need that here to survive. You need other people. And we don't have that anymore in our society, in most of the Western world. You could survive on your own. And maybe that's not such a good thing. Wolf.
Yeah.
You see them? Are these more tracks?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
We also found that the nomad families stuck to pretty traditional gender roles. There was some overlap, and generally everyone just tries to make things run smoothly. But for the most part, it was the men doing the things that are viewed as traditionally masculine, and the women doing the things that are viewed as traditionally feminine. Actually, if we offered to help with cleaning, which we did a couple times in different families, we were always met with this like, no, of course not. That could be because they're just being polite, like people do that in the West too. But we got the impression that it was more because men don't do that. And when we offered to help with things like chopping wood or carrying logs, it was, yeah, sure, of course, that would be great. Now, some people might look at these gender roles and think, okay, well, they're just socially enforced. Like, the only reason people are committing to this role that's set out for them is because there are social expectations. And if you don't meet those social expectations, you're going to be looked at as a bit weird. Like, for example, when we offered to cook and clean, the people were like, no, absolutely not. That's a social force. So you can't really deny that there are social forces that are reifying these gender roles. But also, you can't deny the fact that people are just playing to their biological strengths. These men were so well trained, and it makes sense that if you are a strong man and tasks need to get completed for the family unit to survive, that you would do the tasks that require strength.
While we're struggling up the mountain, he's 2 trees down.
He's been drinking his yak milk.
Yeah, Mongol strength.
Yeah.
So people fall into their roles, not just because of social forces here, but also because they're just doing which behavioral imperatives align with their biological strengths. And that's what gives them their role and their purpose.
This is why it felt crazy to me to fly here from Mongolia. I'm in one of the busiest capitals of the world, in Seoul. And here, everything's comfortable, there's so much going on, there's skincare sales, there are lobster street food and norebangs, these karaoke rooms. There's so much to do, but there's no imperative, something that demands that you do it. It's like I was just listening to this piano piece, and I was in tune with the rhythm, and then it's just like crack, swap to white noise, so much going on, but none of it moves you in a particular way. And it just makes me feel like I'm not surprised that people find it difficult to fill their lives with some kind of meaning in a society like this, because like I said, in Mongolia, these people are surrounded by meaning in the sense that they are demanded to act a certain way by life, and if they don't act that way, horrible things will happen. Whereas here, your behavior is kind of open-ended.
So what are we supposed to do in modern society? Realistically, we're not going to go back to living the natural way where we're surrounded by threat and danger. And I'm not saying that we should. I'm just pointing out that in modern society, yeah, of course, it's great that we have more comfort and we're safer. But with that comes a whole set of new challenges, and I'm obviously not the first one to point that out. So what do you do in a world where there are no imperatives, where you can't just fall in to some expected or necessary role that has already been laid out for you to fulfill? What do? You have to create it from scratch, and that's very difficult. But I think the answer has already been given by the last 100 centuries of psychology, where psychologists have, through all these different disciplines, not just one branch of psychology, but in psychoanalysis, in humanistic psychology, in the hard-nosed empirical psychology, we have all of these branches of psychology coming together and agreeing on one thing, which is that the task of human life, in large part, is to find out who you are as an individual. You have Carl Jung saying this through his idea of individuation.
Would you like to comment a little bit upon this, the process of individuation? Well, that's something quite simple. Take an acorn. Yes. Put it into the ground, it grows, and it becomes an oak. Yes. You see, that is man. Yes.
Abraham Maslow talked about self-actualization, which he changed later, and he described it as being fully human, becoming an individual.
Self-actualization means the making real of the inner self, and that means what you love, what you're interested in, what excites you, what fascinates you, and that is the cause outside yourself. They go, if you're fascinated with something, then you're interested in it out there. You forget about the ego and the self and pride and showing off and applause and stuff like that.
One of the most highly cited theories in psychology today is called self-determination theory. And it kind of agrees with Carl Jung and Abraham Maslow on this, because it's all about how humans can distinguish between the pressures that are coercing them towards a particular behavior from the outside, the external world, and their own internal volition, this feeling of agency you have towards your own values. Like, think of the difference between doing something because you truly value it, like you see the benefit of it, or you just truly enjoy it, and doing something because someone around you who has kind of power over you tells you that you have to do it, or you feel compelled by external forces. It's a huge difference. And there's actually one paper in self-determination theory that catalogs exactly why humans find particular experiences satisfying. Like, what is it about an experience that makes it satisfying? And this feeling of agency, this feeling of volition, like you're in the driver's seat, is one of those things that contributes to it. It's just something that humans find intrinsically satisfying and meaningful, to be authoring your own life and carving out your own path as an individual. And I think that's the reason why it's been echoed in all these different branches of psychology. Like, all of these people seem to be converging on the same truth through different ways of knowing, is because it's so important in today's world. We have no imperatives. We have no structure for our lives, basically. Or at least the structure has been kind of dissolved much more than it ever has in history. So Mongolia kind of ended up being this crash course in masculinity, because we were seeing these men just get everything done throughout the day. They were unfazed. Nothing perturbed them at all. Honestly, it was some of the most incredible strength and fitness I've ever seen in my life. I've trained hundreds of clients, and these men are just something else. They endure crazy amounts during the day, and then they go home and they're like snuggling with their kid, all cutesy. So it seemed like a very healthy, well-rounded form of masculinity. And that's, I think, what struck us, because there's a lot of stuff these days about how masculinity is quite toxic and it's not totally necessary anymore. I think some parts of it are probably necessary, but there's also some merit to that argument. Like, do you really need all of the aspects of the masculine archetype if you are sitting in a cubicle for 12 hours a day in the modern world? I don't know if that's necessary, but that was partially why I also realized that it's important to have a role like they do. Everything they do is infused with meaning and purpose, and that can't be said in the modern world. We have this feeling that we don't really need these traditional roles, and there's not as much of a structure set out for us. And so I think that was the main insight of this Mongolia trip, that the modern world, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because even though we have these massive advancements in our quality of life, we have a whole set of new challenges. And I think having a purposeful role and knowing what that role is probably the number one challenge we face. And I guess the whole Mongolia trip, it's just another expression of the double-edged swordness of the modern world, because the fact that I was even able to go to Mongolia, that's just a product of the technology we have available for us. So I don't think it's right to be just complaining about the world we live in and wishing that we could go back to traditional natural living. I think the better path is to see how we can act correctly in the modern world and create a life that's just as good, if not way better. But what a beautiful experience. So happy that I lived with these nomads and saw a different way to be a human in the world.